Hey everybody, this is Perch answering a viewer message here. An apology to Joe Casey, by the way, because Casey is awesome. Love talking to him on this channel. We'll talk to him tons. I need to schedule the debate with Breen. He sent me a question I need to get to. Like I I I owe that guy beer and dinner and many other things. But anyway, this is let's get to a different mail as I slowly work my way through this giant pile. Um, Hey, Perch, I'll try and keep this one brief. Some of my previous questions long-winded. Does death matter anymore in comics? Obviously the default answer is no, but actually let's do more than just let's do more than just the default answer because it actually becomes an interesting question. We've seen so often that in the lead up to a character being killed off, that the news of it will often be leaked to comics journalism sites. And yet, when the issue finally comes, after the initial outrage shock of the moment, there almost seems to be this collective shrug, and people say they'll bring him or her back in 18 to 24 months. I'll admit I don't follow every detail in comics, but the last time I recall a death or deaths sticking in comics for some time after the issue of death was when those staying in the sanctuary in Heroes in Crisis were all killed. If they were resurrected since then, I'll admit I wasn't aware. Some have, some haven't, I believe, or some were. It was revealed that some weren't actually dead, or just a bunch of nonsense. Anyway, but I can't remember actually. But can't death actually mean something again? I remember as a little kid learning that Jason Todd was killed by the Joker really shocked me, and personally, one of the biggest mistakes was bringing him back permanently. I always felt like Jason's death would always serve as a reminder to both characters and to the readers that no one's safety is guaranteed because the work they do is extremely dangerous and the main character status doesn't make you immortal. But in that time, we've seen Jason Todd, Stephanie Brown, Damian Wayne all die and then come back to life. We've also had characters like Tim Drake be believed to be killed, but it turns out he wasn't really the case. And God only knows what happens to characters in comics I don't read. Am I making any sense? Should death be a permanent thing for characters, or am I being a bit too grim? As always, love the channel video. But okay, so again, short answer: no. Death doesn't mean anything in comics, but there's two levels to that answer. I think you could still have entertaining, engaging comics, and you could still use death as an interesting kind of jumping off point, or not jumping off point, jumping on point, just an interesting plot device. If the death and the resurrection felt like there was a really unique, interesting story behind it. The problem is that in a lot of people's heads, death just means we need a shocking moment in order to sell this particular book. And return means we're going to return it as soon as we need to make money off this character again, and we can have it be a shocking return. That's how most people view death. They don't view it as a story, they view it as a sales gimmick. In many cases, death feels to a lot of readers and collectors and buyers and customers, it feels the same as a variant cover. It feels the same as a relaunch, and oftentimes death and rebirth are tied to relaunches. It doesn't feel like any kind of organic, natural story. To me, one of the dark spots, if you will, or one of the flaws in Hickman's Fantastic Four run was when they killed off Johnny Storm, and they did it with a bunch of marketing behind it of like it's about to be 3, and then Spider-Man briefly joined the team for a period of time, and they and Doctor Doom was in there as well and other things. But that part wasn't the clunky part. The clunky part was nobody, absolutely nobody, believed that Johnny Storm was actually dead. Everybody knew that there would be some adventure, some way to bring him back, some gimmick. And so Hickman, whose story felt like a pretty in-depth, kind of interesting dynamic, wound up feeling like a gimmick. It wound up feeling like a trick to boost sagging sales in the run. And the run actually did have some sagging sales coming into that, so there's good reason why they believe that was happening. That was the problem. And then when he did come back a fairly short time later, again, it didn't feel like a triumphant return. Now, some people who are into the story are like, yeah, that's cool. He's back. But it didn't ever really come across like any kind of amazing storyline moment. Instead, it came across like, now it's time to get a bunch of extra cash by bringing him back to life. That's the problem. I think that with comic characters, and you just need to have this forever soap opera where you stories go on forever. These characters go on forever. I think it's natural for death to be a lot more fluid. We are dealing with, magic and superheroes and dimensions and all this kind of stuff. So death naturally is going to be a little less permanent than other mediums, other genres, and frankly in real life, of course. But it doesn't have to be so trivial. The Phoenix came back to life. Jean Grey came back to life, but it was a long time between when she died during the Dark Phoenix saga and when she came back many years later. There was a story behind it. It didn't completely feel like a cash grab. Now, a lot of people at the time said this feels cheap. They shouldn't have brought her back and everything else. But compared to today, those are the golden years. If you look at what Brubaker did with Bucky and the Winter Soldier, that character was obviously dead for a very long time, and then brought back with a very detailed, very complex story, and it didn't feel, in the comic at least, because Marvel didn't promote it this way, like in this issue, the shocking return to life of a beloved character. It didn't. It actually came about pretty low key. By contrast, you look at what happened with, say, Fear itself, killed off Bucky again, and God, who else died in that? There's two characters who died in that. Both were brought back to life. I think Thor died in that, right? Maybe I don't remember anyway. I don't remember anymore. Loki's died multiple times. Loki died in War of the Realms, and then he wasn't dead in War of the Realms. She-Hulk died in Empire, but no, it wasn't really a death. It feels more like a shock trick than part of the story. And that is why death doesn't matter, because if death no longer feels like a thoughtful part of character development or story, but instead feels like a variant cover, then no, it doesn't matter. And today the problem is, and I do think we're on the cusp of seeing DC return to the death of Superman. I think with that anniversary coming up, they're going to want to do something with that. But we've seen Wonder Woman die. We've seen Superman die. We've seen Batman die. We've seen Green Lantern die. We've seen all these. We've seen all the characters. We've seen the Flash die. Is there any member of the Justice League that hasn't died and been brought back to life in some form or fashion? With the Avengers, we've seen Captain America die. We haven't seen Captain Marvel die, or have we seen Well, we've seen the original Captain Marvel die, of course, but not Captain Marvel die. But my point is, it's happened to everyone, and at this point, I think it would be very hard to come up with a storyline where death actually mattered. Like, I don't know if it's possible to have a comic come out where there's a shocking death that really resonates with everybody, and you care. Can anybody think of one? Other than the indies, the death of a major character in Saga still has the ability to pull at people's hearts. I think it's funny. Walking Dead had the reputation of like nobody is safe, anybody could die. Some people said that cheapened death, but you still felt those deaths. They still tended to matter, even though the story was, death was around every corner in Walking Dead. It still felt pretty relevant. But in the big two, I'm not sure there's a character they could kill at this point where it would have any kind of impact. And it in many ways, I mean, like you identified, they leak the deaths to comics journalism, or sometimes like USA Today or The Atlantic or other places, and it feels like a stunt because it is a stunt. It's not just that it feels like a stunt; it absolutely is a stunt. It's not anything that publishers are taking seriously. It's a gimmick. No different from, hey, we're going to relaunch the Hulk. I know, let's have him fueled by rage this time. Okay, sure. When the comic book relaunches in 2 to 3 years, I'll say this because I recorded this video earlier. It was shocking to me. In the back of my mind, I remembered the Jason Aaron, Mark Silvestri run of Hulk, where Banner was kind of dangerous, and that was kind of the whole point. He'd gone insane and was the villain as a twist. And reading the current Donny Cates comic, I'm like, parts of this seem very familiar. Like, we've been here before. And the fact that Marvel's trotting this out, like, this time they have to deal with Banner. It's like, no, they've dealt with Banner tons. We've seen this. And then when I went back and I'm just like, how many times was this relaunched over the last 10 years? And I'll admit, I was surprised. I had completely forgotten the gimmick of Banner working with S.H.I.E.L.D. and then Banner getting shot in the head and becoming brain damaged, then having to repair. I'd forgotten all of that. Using extremists to get himself back together, and I'd like I had forgotten, and I'd forgotten because it's a gimmick that they just come back to over and over and over. It's a stunt. It's a story pitch that it's like, and in this issue we're going to kill somebody, and then in 5 issues later we're going to bring them back. Nobody's tricked or fooled anymore. It's like if you went to a magic show and while the magician is doing the tricks, the magician is telling you how they're doing the trick. They're like, okay, we're going to saw this lady in half here. Now you know that you're not about to witness actual murder. You know the lady is actually not actually going to get sawed in half. But if before the lady got into the little box, they showed you the little hidden compartment where the legs could go in and all the rest, and they showed you exactly how the trick was going to go while it was sawing, the audience isn't going to be invested in that trick. Of course not. They know where it's going. And that's the problem with death in comics. Everybody knows where it's going. It's going to be used as a stunt. It's going to be reversed in a few months. And then, you'll keep on going. It's actually charming to think, oh, they'll get rid of that death in 3 to 4 years. No, they'll usually get rid of the death in like 6 months or less, like almost right away. Death is barely an inconvenience in comics. Anyway, maybe there's some of you out there who still, find death interesting and compelling in comics. Let me know in the comments below. Maybe I'm being too pessimistic about this, but is there any character in the big two that they could kill and it would matter? Like anybody would go, oh wow. There's nobody. I mean, some of you may in the comments like, oh well, if they killed one of the diversity characters, they could do that. Who cares? I mean, who knows? Maybe this John Kent storyline where they've revealed him to be bisexual. Maybe the next story beat is, Doomsday Jr. shows up and murders him. And then we get that iconic scene, except instead of Lois crying over Superman, it's this, it's the Nakamura kid, or was that? Anyway, it's a kid. Jay is holding him up and crying over him. And then in 6 months or so, then we could have the 4 Supermen, only like one's like super bro. And then, anyway, you get the idea. Maybe that's where they're going with it. I don't know. Absolutely. I don't think that there's any character that's safe at this point from death. And I don't think there's any character that, would really move the needle in terms of people that are like, holy cow, they killed that character? I can't think of one. Anyway, let me know if I'm wrong. Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course. And thanks for listening.